Okay, fellas, gather round. Today we're diving into a little something called the Book of Job. Yes, Bible. Before you click away in search of something less, shall we say, archaic, hear me out. This isn't your grandma's Sunday school lesson, though she's welcome to watch too. The Book of Job is basically the OG story of why me. You know that feeling when life throws you a curveball, then backs up and runs you over with the whole darn bus? Yeah, Job lived that. Except, instead of a bus, it was more like a plague of locusts, a house fire, and losing his car keys all in one day. Now, you might be thinking, Lamar, I pay my taxes, recycle, and occasionally call my mother. What does some ancient dude's bad day have to do with me? Well, my friend, that's where the magic happens. Because despite being written thousands of years ago, Job's story is surprisingly relatable, even for us modern, sophisticated folks. So, who this Job guy? Picture this. Successful dude, loaded with kids, more livestock than a petting zoo, and a reputation for being a righteous dude. Think Keanu Reeves, but with sandals and like way more sheep. Job was living the good life, at least by ancient Babylonian standards. Then, bam. The universe decided to use Job as a cosmic punching bag. He lost everything, his family, his possessions, his health, the works. It's enough to make you want to chuck your phone into the ocean and move to a yurt in Mongolia.
But here's the kicker. Job, despite wanting to pull a dramatic Greek tragedy moment, didn't completely lose his marbles. He questioned, he raged, he even argued with his buddies. More on that later. But he kept coming back to his faith. Now, before you roll your eyes, remember, this was a time long before therapy dogs and weighted blankets. Job's story isn't just about suffering. It's about how we handle the really crappy days. It's about wrestling with doubt, clinging to hope, and maybe, just maybe, finding a bit of wisdom in the wreckage.
Now, let's be real for a second. Reading the Book of Job can feel a bit like trying to decipher ancient hieroglyphics after a long night out. The language is formal, the imagery is, and there's a lot of talk about God that might make you shift uncomfortably in your seat. But here's the thing. Beneath the archaic language and cultural context lies a deeply human story. Job's struggles, loss, grief, questioning everything he thought he knew, are timeless. They're the same struggles we grapple with today, even if we express them with fewer woe is me pronouncements. The Book of Job reminds us that we're not alone in our suffering. It's a raw and honest portrayal of what it means to be human, to experience both the highs and lows of life, and to grapple with the big, messy questions of faith, doubt, and the meaning of it all. So, we've got this righteous dude, Job, who gets put through the ringer by forces beyond his control. We've established that his story, though ancient, is still weirdly relevant to our modern lives. But what does it all? That's where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean we're about to delve into some seriously deep theological waters, so hold on to your hats. Over the next few sections, we'll unpack the Book of Job, exploring its key themes, dissecting its most head-scratching moments, and, dare I say it, having a little fun along the way. We'll meet Job's friends. Spoiler alert, they're terrible at giving advice. Delve into the nature of suffering and explore what it means to have faith in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll probably question everything we thought we knew about life, the universe, and everything. Are you ready? Let's do this. Okay, so Job's life is a dumpster fire, but here's where the story gets seriously weird. It all starts with a bet. Yep, you heard that right. God and Satan are chilling in the heavenly realm. Picture a less glamorous version of Mount Olympus with fewer togas and more harps. When Satan starts talking smack about Job, oh sure, Satan sneers. Probably. Job's all pious and righteous. But that's just because you've showered him with blessings. Take it all away, and I bet he'll curse you to your face. Now, we've all been there, right? Maybe not with God and Satan, but definitely with that one friend who loves a good I told you so moment. God, being God, apparently can't resist a challenge. So, he agrees to let Satan mess with Job, within certain limits, of course. It's like a cosmic game show, with Job as the unwitting contestant. Now, before you start questioning the ethics of divine gambling, remember, this story was written a time ago. The point is, Job's suffering wasn't random. It was a test, orchestrated by the highest powers in the universe, which, if you think about it, is either oddly comforting or deeply disturbing. Maybe both. So, Job's world is falling apart, and he's understandably having a bit of a meltdown. Enter his friends, stage left. Now you'd think these guys would show up with a casserole, a shoulder to cry on, and maybe a stiff drink. But no, these guys are the worst kind of friends. The ones who show up with unsolicited advice and a judgmental side eye. There's Eliphaz, the oldest and most long-winded of the bunch. He's convinced that Job must have done to deserve this, because clearly, bad things only happen to bad people. It's the ancient equivalent of karma's a bitch. Then there's Bildad, the master of platitudes. He loves to spout off generic statements about God's justice and the importance of righteousness, without actually addressing Job's pain. And let's not forget Zophar, the angry friend. He's basically convinced that Job is secretly a terrible person and deserves everything he's getting. These so-called friends proceed to spend chapters upon chapters comforting Job by telling him how he messed up.
"Come on, Job," he probably says, adjusting his robe for dramatic effect. "Spill the beans."
Bildad, never one to miss an opportunity for a lecture, chimes in with a rousing speech about God's justice.
"The wicked may prosper for a time," he intones, stroking his beard thoughtfully, "but ultimately they will get what they deserve."
It's the kind of vague, unhelpful advice that makes you want to scream into a pillow. Meanwhile, Job is sitting there, covered in sores, grieving the loss of his family and livelihood, thinking, "Are you serious right now?" He tries to explain that he's done nothing wrong, that he's always tried to live a good life, but his friends aren't having it. They're so convinced of their own righteousness that they're blind to Job's pain.
But have you tried yoga? Job's friends, probably.
As Job's friends continue their endless cycle of accusations and platitudes, Job reaches his breaking point.
Have you tried sacrificing a goat? One of them probably suggests, completely missing the point.
Job, in a moment of frustration that transcends millennia, lets loose. He rails against his friends' shallow theology, their inability to comprehend the depths of his suffering, and their frankly terrible advice. He curses the day he was born, questioning the very nature of God's justice and the meaning of his own existence. It's a raw, visceral expression of pain and despair that still resonates today.
When you just can't even with your so-called support system.
Job's outburst is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most spiritual thing we can do is acknowledge our pain, our anger, our doubt. It's okay to not have all the answers, to question everything, to rage against the unfairness of it all. In fact, sometimes that's the only way to start making sense of the chaos. The sound of silence. Where's God when you need him? Or, a decent Wi-Fi connection. Okay, so Job's world is a smoldering ruin. His friends are about as useful as a chocolate teapot, and God's been conspicuously silent throughout this whole ordeal. You'd think the big guy might, drop in for a quick pep talk, offer some divine words of comfort, maybe whip up a batch of those heavenly brownies everyone's always talking about. But no, silence. It's enough to make you think God's put on noise-canceling headphones and is binge-watching something more entertaining on the celestial equivalent of Netflix. Maybe it's a documentary about the creation of the universe. Or maybe it's just reruns of Friends. This silence, this seeming indifference, is perhaps the most relatable aspect of Job's story. We've all been there, haven't we? Praying for a sign, a miracle, even just a text back from that one person, only to be met with the deafening roar of nothing. It's enough to make even the most devout believer question everything. Job's Power Ballad, a song of lament, sung in the key of existential despair. But here's the thing about Job. Even in the face of unimaginable suffering and divine silence, he never completely gives up on faith. Oh, he comes close. He rails against God, questions his justice, even wishes he'd never been born. It's basically the ancient equivalent of a really, really angsty power ballad.
Why me? What have I done to deserve this? Where were you when my world fell apart?
It's raw, it's emotional. It's the kind of song that gets played at maximum volume during a particularly bad breakup. Job's lament, however, isn't just a cry of despair. It's also a conversation, a desperate plea for understanding, a way of wrestling with the big, messy questions of life and faith. And in its own way, it's an act of defiance. Job refuses to let his suffering silence him. He will be heard, even if the only one listening is the God he's questioning. And then, just when you think God's going to leave Job unread for all eternity, he shows up. But he doesn't arrive with a gentle tap on the shoulder or a soothing voice from the heavens. No, God comes in like a boss, riding a whirlwind, because of course he does, and unleashing a torrent of words that would make a Shakespearean soliloquy sound like a casual text message.
Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?
God booms, his voice echoing with the power of creation itself.
Have you commanded the morning since your days began, or caused the dawn to know its place?
It's a rhetorical beatdown of epic proportions, a reminder that God, created the universe and stuff. God then proceeds to list off his many accomplishments, creating the oceans, setting the stars in their courses, designing the intricacies of the natural world. It's a humbling reminder of our own insignificance in the grand scheme of things, a cosmic reality check that would make even the most arrogant Instagram influencer feel a little sheepish. So, what's Job's response to all this? Does he argue back? Does he double down on his accusations? Does he, challenge God to a divine game of celestial laser tag? Nope. Job does something unexpected. He listens. He humbles himself before God, acknowledging the vastness of his power and the limitations of his own understanding.
I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted.
He repents of his earlier pronouncements, admitting that he's been talking about things he doesn't fully comprehend. It's a complete 180 from his earlier anger and despair. This transformation isn't about Job giving in to some kind of divine dictatorship. It's about recognizing that sometimes faith requires us to let go of our need to understand everything, to accept that there are things beyond our comprehension. It's about finding peace, not in the answers, but in the presence of something greater than ourselves. So, after all the drama, the suffering, the whirlwind-induced theological smackdown, what's the takeaway? What can we, your average modern-day dudes, possibly glean from this ancient story of loss, faith, and divine intervention? Well, buckle up, buttercups, because here are some Job-inspired nuggets of wisdom for your soul. First, life is unfair. Deal with it. Bad things happen to good people. Sometimes the universe just decides to use you as a cosmic punching bag. It's not personal. Well, maybe it is, if you're Job, but you get the idea. Second, it's okay to question everything. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't be angry, confused, or downright pissed off when life throws you a curveball. Doubt is part of faith, just like darkness is part of light. Third, sometimes the best thing you can do is listen. Listen to your own heart. Listen to the wisdom of those who've been there. And maybe, just maybe, listen for that still, small voice within that speaks of hope and resilience. And finally, remember that even in the midst of suffering, even when it feels like the world is falling apart, there's always beauty to be found, lessons to be learned, and a God who, despite his occasional penchant for dramatic entrances, is always there, waiting to meet us in the whirlwind of our lives. All right, lads, we've delved into the Book of Job, met his not-so-supportive friends, and witnessed God's dramatic entrance. Now let's bring this whole shebang into the 21st century, shall we? Imagine Job, not in itchy robes and sandals, but rocking a pair of slim-fit jeans and a distressed leather jacket. He's traded in his flock of sheep for a Tesla, his ancient scrolls for a smartphone, and his lamentations for, well, he probably still laments, but now he does it with the help of a therapist and a Spotify playlist titled Existential Crisis Anthems. Job's story, despite its archaic packaging, is shockingly relatable to our modern struggles. Think about it. We've all faced those moments when life throws a wrench, or a whole toolbox, into our carefully constructed plans. Maybe you got laid off, your crypto investments tanked harder than a lead balloon, or you accidentally liked your ex's new girlfriend's Instagram post from 3 years ago. We've all been there, right? The point is, regardless of whether you're living in ancient Babylonia or 21st century suburbia, certain human experiences are universal. Loss, grief, frustration, that nagging feeling that the universe is playing a cruel cosmic joke on you. And just like Job, we're left grappling with the big questions. Why me? What's the point? Is there even a God? And if so, is he accepting applications for a new divine assistant? Now, I know what you're thinking. Lamar, you say, scratching your beard thoughtfully. My life might be a bit of a mess, but at least I'm not covered in boils and hanging out in a pile of ashes. And you'd be right. Perspective is important. And let's be honest, Job had it rough, even by ancient standards. But here's the thing about that whole "it could be worse" mentality. It's often used as a way to minimize our own struggles, to dismiss the very real pain and frustration we experience in our seemingly less than biblical lives. Just because your suffering isn't on par with a biblical epic doesn't mean it's not valid. The Book of Job reminds us that suffering is relative. What might seem trivial to one person could be a mountain of despair for another. So the next time you're tempted to tell someone or yourself to buck up because it could be worse, remember Job. Remember that sometimes the most compassionate response is simply to listen, empathize, and acknowledge the very real, even if not biblical level struggles we all face. Okay, let's indulge in a little thought experiment, shall we? Imagine Job, plucked from his ancient times and dropped into our modern world. How do you think he'd fare? Would he thrive amidst the constant stimulation of social media and the pressure to curate a picture-perfect life? On the one hand, Job might appreciate the therapeutic outlets available to us. Imagine him in a support group, sharing his story with others who've also experienced loss. On the other hand, Job would probably lose his mind, scrolling through Instagram. He'd be bombarded with unsolicited advice from armchair theologians on Twitter. The modern world presents its own unique set of challenges to our faith and sanity. And while Job might not have all the answers, his story reminds us that it's okay to struggle and seek support. Finding your inner job. Because sometimes you just gotta embrace the existential crisis. What can we learn from Job, the OG king of existential angst? Embrace the questions, the doubts, the messy, uncomfortable realities of life. We're not alone in our struggles. Even the most righteous face uncertainty. Job's story teaches us it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to question everything, to demand answers from a silent God. Job's story is a testament to human resilience. Even in unimaginable loss, there's a spark within us that refuses to be extinguished. So, channel your inner Job. Embrace the questions. Challenge the answers. And hey, if all else fails, there's always therapy, a good playlist, and the comforting knowledge that at least you're not covered in boils. Tuning in to Ancient Babylon, hit singles, chart-topping liars, and the latest in temple fashion. All right, folks, let's hit pause on the existential crisis for a sec and take a trip back in time, shall we? I'm talking way back, to the era when Babylonian idol was an actual thing, not just a regrettable career move. Imagine, if you will, the sights and sounds of Job's world, a bustling marketplace filled with the aroma of exotic spices and the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths hard at work. Forget your Spotify playlists and noise-canceling headphones. This was a world of live music, folks. Think haunting melodies played on lyres and harps, rhythmic chants accompanying religious rituals, and the occasional shepherd belting out a mournful tune about a lost sheep, probably a hit single back then. And the fashion. Oh, the fashion. Forget your skinny jeans and graphic tees, folks. We're talking flowing robes, intricate headdresses, and enough jewelry to make even Mr. T jealous. It was a time for bold statements, whether you were a king draped in gold or a humble shepherd rocking the latest in sheepskin chic. Move over. Michelangelo. Ancient Babylonian art was lit, figuratively speaking, of course. But let's be real, folks. When we're talking about ancient Babylon, we gotta talk about the art. Forget your Renaissance masterpieces and impressionist landscapes. Babylonian art was where it was at. Think massive ziggurats reaching towards the heavens, intricate carvings depicting mythical creatures and epic battles, and enough gold leaf to make a Kardashian blush. These weren't just pretty pictures, folks. They were expressions of power, faith, and a worldview that was deeply intertwined with the natural world and the cosmos. Imagine walking through a temple adorned with these intricate carvings, the flickering light of oil lamps casting dancing shadows on the walls, the air thick with incense and the murmur of prayers. It was an immersive experience, folks, designed to transport you to another realm. Job's world, reimagined. If only they had GoPros and Instagram filters. Now I know what you're thinking. If only Job had a smartphone to document his struggles, right? Imagine the Instagram stories. Day one of my existential crisis. Lost my livestock, my house is on fire, and my friends are being totally unhelpful. Blessed him, send wine. Okay, maybe not. But seriously, imagine if we could see Job's world through a modern lens. We'd have drone footage of those vast flocks of sheep and their unfortunate demise, time-lapse videos of the construction of those massive ziggurats, and maybe even a viral TikTok dance challenge inspired by Babylonian religious rituals. Don't pretend you wouldn't try it. The point is, folks, even though Job lived in a time and place vastly different from our own, his story still resonates with us because it taps into something universal. The human experience of suffering, faith, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair. Bridging the millennia. Finding the timeless in the ancient, and maybe a good podcast recommendation or two. So as we wrap up our whirlwind tour of ancient Babylon, let's remember that the Book of Job, for all its archaic language and historical context, is more than just an ancient text. It's a timeless story about the human condition, a story that continues to speak to us across the millennia. And if you're looking for a way to bridge that gap between then and now, might I suggest checking out some of the amazing resources available today. We're talking insightful podcasts that break down complex theological concepts into bite-sized pieces, documentaries that bring the ancient world to life with stunning visuals, and even apps that let you experience the Book of Job like never before. Interactive whirlwind not included. So, don't let the dust of antiquity deter you, folks. The Book of Job, like a fine Babylonian wine, or maybe a craft beer brewed with ancient grains, has only gotten better with age. It's a story that challenges us, inspires us, and reminds us that even in the midst of suffering, even when we're surrounded by the ruins of our own personal Babylons, there's always hope, always meaning, and always a good podcast waiting to be discovered. So, there you have it, folks. The Book of Job, a whirlwind tour of ancient anguish, divine interventions, and some seriously questionable fashion choices. We've laughed, we've cried. Okay, maybe we've mostly laughed. We've pondered the mysteries of the universe and the meaning of life, all through the lens of a story written thousands of years ago. But Job's legacy, much like those ancient ziggurats that still dot the landscape, endures. He's more than just a guy who had a really, really bad week, or year, or decade, depending on how you interpret the timeline. He's a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of faith, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. Job's story reminds us that it's okay to ask the hard questions, to challenge the status quo, even to shake our fists at the heavens in frustration. It's in those moments of vulnerability, of raw honesty, that we often find our greatest strength, our deepest faith, and maybe even a glimmer of hope amidst the wreckage. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lamar, you say, adjusting your noise-canceling headphones and reaching for another craft beer. This has been oddly inspiring and all, but where's the practical advice? How does this ancient tale of woe help me navigate the daily grind of deadlines, traffic jams, and existential dread? Well, my friend, that's the beauty of the Book of Job. It's not some cheesy self-help manual with a 10-step program to happiness and fulfillment, though that would be an amazing marketing opportunity. It's a raw, honest exploration of the human condition, warts and all. The Book of Job doesn't offer easy answers, but it does provide a framework for grappling with the big questions. It teaches us that it's okay to not have it all figured out, to doubt, to question, to rage against the seeming unfairness of it all. So, the next time you're stuck in traffic, staring down a mountain of emails, or contemplating the futility of existence while waiting for your takeout order, remember Job. Remember that even amidst the mundane, the frustrating, the downright absurd, there's a certain grandeur to the human experience. We all have our own personal whirlwinds to navigate, our own moments of profound questioning and soul-searching. But it's in those moments, when we're stripped bare of our illusions of control, that we often catch a glimpse of something greater than ourselves, something that connects us to the divine, to the mystery, to the very essence of what it means to be alive. It might not be a burning bush or a voice booming from the heavens, though let's be honest, that would make for a much more interesting commute. But it's there. It's in the kindness of a stranger, the beauty of a sunset, the unexpected laughter shared with a friend. It's in the resilience of the human spirit, the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, there's always light to be found. So, as we bid farewell to Job and his epic tale of woe and wonder, let's carry his legacy with us. Let's embrace the questions, challenge the answers, and never stop seeking meaning in the midst of the chaos. And hey, if you happen to encounter a burning bush or a talking donkey along the way, please do let me know. It'll make for a killer story on next week's show. Until then, keep it real, keep it righteous, and keep your camels close, metaphorically speaking, of course. unless you're actually a shepherd, in which case, good for you.